Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to call this hearing to order, and I want to begin by welcoming our witness, Brenda Mallory, Chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, back before our committee today. We appreciate you being here to discuss the CEQ's work since your confirmation last year. Some of you heard me, she's heard me say this before, but I know of one Delawarean who's been the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. He's a former governor. He's a Republican, and he had been a leader at the DuPont Company, became governor of Delaware. And when Richard Nixon was president, then later Gerald Ford, they nominated Russ Peterson, who served under two presidents, as chairman of CEQ. And I used to ask, I was in state treasurer, I used to ask Governor Peterson, what did you do when you were chair of CEQ? And he used a music analogy. He said, it's like when you're CEQ chairman, you're like the orchestra leader, and you have an orchestra with many people playing instruments. They make different sounds, but the idea of the chair of the committee, the CEQ, is make sure that the different pieces that have, and the government have, just like musical instruments, make sure that they play in harmony. And that's the way he described it to me. I think it's a pretty apt description. So the orchestra leader here today is Brenda Mallory, and we welcome you. We also thank you for celebrating Earth Day with us in Delaware last month. Your visits to Delaware State College and Delaware State University, and Delaware Technical Community College made a real impact on everybody we met, especially the kids, large and small. But they ran the gamut for everything from kindergarten to doctoral programs at Delaware State University. And you're welcome to visit us in Delaware at any time. Thanks for coming. Since the moment that he took our office, President Biden has made leading our country out of the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression, as well as addressing climate change and advancing environmental justice, top priorities of his administration. The role that CEQ plays in achieving these goals cannot be understated, but it's not well understood by a whole lot of people. CEQ ensures, as I mentioned earlier, that federal agencies work in harmony to protect our environment and to improve public health, which is critical to reaching a nurturing environment for job creation and job preservation. We're always interested in how do we don't create jobs in what we do, but we help create that nurturing environment, and CEQ plays a vital role. With more than 8 million Americans back to work since President Biden took off, that's a lot of people working that weren't working a year ago. It's clear that CEQ's urgent work is not stymieing economic growth. Earlier this year, the fourth National Climate Assessment made clear that nations throughout the world must dramatically and urgently reduce emissions if we're to avoid the most devastating impacts of climate change. Driving to the train station this morning, I was just hearing the kind of problems that they're having in New Mexico, wildfires, and really devastating stuff. That is just another example of what we face. These impacts are already being felt in communities in the United States and across our planet, showing us just how vulnerable we are to climate change and extreme weather. This last week, we saw, I don't know about where y'all live, but on the East Coast, we had 4 days of rain, saw some of that in Washington, and produced flooding in places where, frankly, it doesn't flood a whole lot, including Delaware. But prior to that, in the last year alone, we witnessed record heat waves in Oregon, where only a third of households have air conditioning. Think about that. Wildfires burned millions of acres in California, Montana, Arizona, and other western states. The same hurricane that knocked out access to power and water for 1 million people in Louisiana and Mississippi then went on up the East Coast to produce flash floods in New Jersey and New York. People there actually drowned in those places, and especially in New York, actually drowned in their basements, unable to escape the torrent of floodwater. According to the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, damages from last year's disasters total roughly $145 billion. $145 billion, that's just in 1 year. So it's becoming increasingly clear that the administration's focus on climate change is both timely and, I believe, critical. Addressing the long-standing environmental inequities in our nation is equally important and also linked to climate change. We know that while climate change threatens to disrupt all communities and affects all aspects of our economy, it poses unique threats to communities that are already vulnerable. In other words, Americans living in lower income and marginalized communities have less ability to prepare for and recover from extreme weather. The least among us have the most to lose from inaction on climate. And that's why our federal agencies need to address these twin goals of climate action and environmental justice together. Fortunately, we have an important tool to improve federal analysis and decision-making, and that is the National Environmental Policy Act, known as NEPA. NEPA established the Council on Environmental Quality in 1969, and this was done in part to provide agencies with high-quality information on the environmental effects on their proposed actions. Over the years, we've made a number of adjustments to NEPA. It's not exactly the same as it was in 1969. We've made some tweaks and I hope improvements, ensuring that the law functions as intended while also not being overly burdensome to industry. Early this year, CEQ finalized revisions to the rule that implement NEPA. This restored critical protection under NEPA and also provided agencies and other stakeholders with greater certainty as they began to implement the programs created under the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has its roots, its origins literally in this room, in this committee. These revisions will ensure that agencies consider the cumulative impacts of a project, such as the implications for climate change and the question of whether the impact is on a community that's already vulnerable. CEQ also has been coordinating efforts across the federal government to improve the federal permitting process for clean energy technologies, such as carbon capture and sequestration, something that several of us are very much interested in. And today, we look forward to hearing more about those efforts from our witnesses. I would also be remiss if I didn't set the record straight with respect to the Biden administration's policy actions and gas prices in our country, something about which there's a fair amount of controversy, as we know. But the last time I checked, the United States is still the top oil and gas producer in the world, producing more than we consume. And with more than 9,000 unused approved permits to drill offshore, the oil and gas industry, not the federal permitting process, bears more than a little responsibility for the current level of domestic production, but we can get into more of that later. In addition to its permitting efforts, CEQ has also been hard at work delivering on the administration's promise to prioritize environmental justice and equitably distribute the benefits of climate actions. As part of that effort, CEQ has released a draft version of its climate and environmental justice screening tool, helping agencies better identify underserved or overburdened communities. And they've also recently hired, I believe, a new director of environmental justice to oversee this important work. CEQ has also established sustainability goals for federal buildings and other federal procurements and launched a $1 billion effort known as the America the Beautiful Challenge. The America the Beautiful Challenge to support conservation and restoration projects on federal lands. All this demonstrates, I believe, that the administration's commitment to leading by example when it comes to doing what is good and what is right for our planet. And so we're looking forward to hearing from you, Madam. Do people call you Chair Mallory? What is your official title? Pardon?
Sorry. Yes, they do say chair if I'm not able to stop them.
All right, well. All right. All right, Ms. Mallory, we're delighted on the critical efforts that you're leading and whether CEQ has the resources it needs to effectively carry out your work. And before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to our ranking member for opening remarks and to get us started. We have a Delawarean, Greg Williams, who's been nominated to serve on the Federal District Court in Delaware. I'm introducing him in about 5 minutes on the Judiciary Committee, so I'll rejoin you shortly. And in the meantime, I leave you in good hands. All right, take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for leaving me in charge. And thank you for holding today's hearing to conduct the oversight on the Council on Environmental Quality and CEQ, and thank you for coming with us today. Chair, I know that both you and I are very proud of this committee's monumental achievement of developing and reporting surface transportation and drinking and wastewater legislation unanimously last year. And we're also very proud that when those bills became law at the end of the last year as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, and soon hopefully our water legislation, which we passed last week out of committee unanimously, will also join that IIJA into law. A top priority for all of us in the committee is to make sure the programs and authorizations we carefully negotiated move from being words on a page to progress to projects on the ground. If IIJA is implemented as Congress intended, we will develop modern roads and bridges to connect rural communities, critical water infrastructure projects to create access to clean water, improvements to our transmission system to ensure that access to reliable and affordable power, and the development of natural gas pipelines and other energy projects to ensure fuel for both here and exports abroad, a need that has been made all the more real by the Russia war in Ukraine. The funding and authorizations provided by IIJA will propel development, but those projects must also complete environmental reviews and secure federal permits before shovels can actually go in the ground. In that legislation, we also recognize that the status quo for NEPA reviews and permitting has been unacceptable. So a 2020 CEQ report found that the average environmental impact statement took 4.5 years to be completed. We know that some projects can take up to 10 years to get through the NEPA permitting process. Congress explicitly directed streamlining of environmental reviews for transportation projects, particularly by codifying the one federal decision policy for certain transportation projects. That policy recognizes that delays caused by a never-ending environmental review process can kill or stifle projects and investment. IIJA puts in place a common-sense guidepost that NEPA reviews for major transportation projects will take no longer than 2 years, and all environmental permits and other project authorizations should follow within 90 days after that. A clear project timeline will help to plan, finance, and construct transportation projects within the 5-year authorization window for the federal highway programs. Congress's clear intent, both in the highway bill and in other portions of the IIJA, such as the permanent reauthorization of the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, was to ensure projects are completed faster so that the American people can benefit from the investments. As the agency charged with overseeing implementation of the NEPA Act, as well as the agency that serves as an environmental coordinating hub administration-wide, CEQ can play a unique and instrumental role in implementing Congress's goals. CEQ could institute environmental rule review and permitting efficiencies that can make the IIJA implementation a success. I will say that nothing that I have seen coming out of CEQ assures me that this is what's going to happen. Certainly, improving NEPA efficiency does not appear to be a priority. Instead, CEQ seems very busy implementing executive orders that direct CEQ to manage and develop countless new administration-led policies not authorized in statute, from coming up with an environmental justice screening tool to be employed administration-wide, to managing new federal efforts to transition all government cars to electric vehicles in an unrealistic time frame. CEQ is bogged down with activities imposed by the president unilaterally, and even then, CEQ can't even keep up with the president's own timelines. For example, the draft environmental justice tool was not released until this February, which is actually 5 months after the president's self-imposed deadline. In the meantime, CEQ has not provided, I don't think, adequate attention to actually implementing NEPA. The one major action related to NEPA has taken, I do not believe will speed up projects. Last month, the CEQ rolled back 3 key reforms made to NEPA under the Trump administration. CEQ proposes to put the federal government in charge of deciding the project's purpose and need. CEQ would encourage individual federal agencies to layer on additional review requirements, and CEQ is directing agencies to bring in cumulative and indirect impacts that will have the effect of putting the thumb on the scale against certain projects. In doing so, CEQ has only amplified ambiguity and uncertainty that we're trying to get around within the NEPA review process, which will slow down our project delivery. The opposition for project developers across industries, from road builders to energy producers, has been swift and emphatic. Their message is clear. Why is CEQ making the NEPA process more difficult, not faster and clearer? CEQ has shown no willingness to expedite the review and permitting review process for CCUS as directed by Congress in the Use It Act. CEQ has provided guidance that largely serves to present alleged pros and cons of CCUS and fails to provide concrete direction to federal agencies to actually expedite CCUS projects. That's disappointing to me as somebody who's a big supporter of that, and telling that even with respect to projects that are clearly necessary to the administration's well-publicized climate goals, CEQ is apparently unwilling to propose reforms that could cut that red tape. Chair Mallory, thank you for coming today to discuss some of the issues that I've brought up, and I'm sure you will. This could not be a more important time for this discussion. Just this morning, the administration has released an action plan for expediting permitting decisions, and I look forward to learning more about that plan, as well as how the administration will implement the project delivery improvements enacted by Congress. The actions the administration takes now concerning environmental review and permitting will determine the implementation of the IIJA, the Use It Act, and other recent legislation, how it delivers to the American people the infrastructure improvements that Congress intended and that they deserve. I look forward to today's hearing, and I will turn it over to you, Chair, for your opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Capito, and also thank you to Ranking Member Carper. It's a pleasure to be here. Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Last month marked 1 year since I was confirmed by this body. Since then, my staff and I have been working on behalf of President Biden and the American people to find common sense solutions to the environmental challenges that families face in their daily lives. I have been fortunate to meet with a number of you to understand your priorities so that we can work together to deliver cleaner air, water, and lands to the American people. Serving in this role is an honor, and I am grateful to the President and to you for placing your faith in me. In my travels over the past year, I heard from residents of one of Michigan's most polluted areas, from communities in Delaware, to families in New Orleans and neighbors in Tampa, all of whom live in the shadow of polluting industries. These communities have been coping for decades with toxic pollution in the air they breathe and water they drink. President Nixon once said, "Clean air, clean water, open spaces. These should once again be the birthright of every American." Indeed, the mission of safeguarding clean air and clean water has long been a shared American value. This value grounds our work at CEQ. Every person in this country should be able to expect clean water from their tap or well. That is not the reality for far too many communities. Every person in this country should be able to expect that air they breathe won't make them sick. That is also not the reality for far too many communities. For too long, we have failed to deliver on these basic protections. That is why our environmental justice work in the Biden-Harris administration is so important. While our work is far from over, I am proud of the work we have done so far to set the foundation to tackle a legacy of injustice. Together with Congress, we have begun the hard work of alleviating the environmental burdens that so many communities experience. Through unprecedented investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law, many of which were unanimously supported by this committee, we are replacing lead pipes, accelerating Superfund cleanups, cleaning up abandoned mines and oil wells, and protecting the most vulnerable communities from fires, floods, and storms. The impacts of these investments are not abstract. They are helping Americans right now. The bipartisan infrastructure law is also helping us to plan for the future. Thanks to this historic funding, we are going to be doing a lot more building in the next few years. From electric vehicle charging infrastructure, to wind turbines and solar farms, to the transmission that will move this new clean power. The question we are grappling with is, how will we build faster and better? How will we build so that we are protecting communities while growing our clean energy economy at the pace required by the climate crisis? This morning, we released a permitting action plan that tackles this challenge in 4 ways. First, we will set clear timelines for the projects to get reviewed and permitted. Second, we will use public dashboards so that everyone can track where projects stand in the process, including nearby communities. Third, we will hire more staff in the offices that are doing the hard work of permitting and reviews. And fourth, we will use the old saying, measure twice, cut once. Smart and early design, analysis, and public input save time by avoiding conflict, litigation, and waste. I want to close by saying that the investments that President Biden and Congress made will deliver a cleaner environment for generations to come. But we also need Congress's continued help to transition to clean energy at the pace and scale required to meet the challenge of climate change. The bipartisan infrastructure law puts us on the right path, but there is still more work to be done. The clean energy provisions the Senate is considering would help clean up and reduce carbon emissions in the power and transportation sectors while cutting energy costs for American families. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. And I will start the questions. And I want to ask you just a quick question on one of your 4 points of the release of the information this morning. You mentioned hire more staff. Is that at Fish and Wildlife, hire more staff?
I think basically what the plan calls for is agencies doing the assessment that is necessary to determine where they need resources and then acting on that.
Well, I would recommend Fish and Wildlife has been is holding up a lot of the permitting, and it's very frustrating to a lot of people who are trying to move whatever the project, clean energy, whatever the project. It's so on that one, I think we both agree there's more resources needed. Let me ask you about the international situation, since I mentioned that in my opening statement. We see that the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has really, I think, put a light, and the President has talked about this, on the need for energy security both here and abroad. And he has, the President has mentioned the ability of the United States to help with liquefied natural gas and things of that nature to help Europe become less dependent on Putin. So I guess, would you agree that we must immediately act to replace Russian imports into Europe with American-made energy? Do you agree with that?
Senator, what I would say, the President has been clear that the Ukraine situation and Russia's unprovoked action causes us to look at our the current crises that we were already dealing with, and the climate crisis being critical to that, to assess how we take action that helps the Ukraine situation but doesn't undermine our overall goals for climate action.
Well, I was going to ask next, have you taken any specific actions to strengthen our energy security, increase our domestic energy production to meet this, and export more? I think the answer to that is no.
I think the answer, Secretary Capito.
Well, I'll take it.
Secretary of Senator Capito is that what we are trying to do, as I said, is find that balance so that the President can continue to provide the support that Ukraine needs, but that we don't lose track of our overall goals to address the climate.
Well, I guess I'm talking less about Ukraine at this point, although there's certainly in our hearts and minds, and where we're going to be passing in probably a very large package to help them. I'm talking about the rest of Europe, who is now held hostage to Putin and his natural gas supplies. Let me ask you this question on the permitting issue that I've talked about with the IIJA. Does this run into conflict with some of the goals that you've set forward in terms of a 2-year timeline, a 90-day repeat, shortening the time of the projects? How do you see those working in conjunction with one another? Because I feel as though you could create a conflict there.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Senator. I appreciate that question. I mean, one of the things that I have been trying to do, consistent with the President's goals from the beginning of my time at CEQ, is find a way to meet the multiple goals that the President has set before us. he has been very clear that he wants us to ensure that we get the projects done that are necessary in order to meet the investments that we've identified as being important through the bipartisan infrastructure law and other laws, but to do it in the right way so that we are making smart decisions that allow us to meet our multiple goals. So I would say that the whole effort that is reflected in the permitting action plan this morning is us trying to bring together sort of the best tools that are available that to take advantage of what we know has worked in the federal government to get decisions done in a way that is both appropriate but also recognizes what our ultimate values are, and that is what we believe we can achieve through the permitting action plan so that you get the projects, but you also get them done well.
Yeah, I was interested in one of the quotes from your statement is more building in the next few years. And it appears sort of laced through your, action plans that you took on the NEPA regulatory changes, where you've taken down 3 of the major provisions that the Trump administration put forward. I mentioned it in my opening statement. Only sets up more regulations from different federal regulators. Again, it looks like a burdensome, well, how do I want to say this? A burdensome package, again, to slow any kind of new construction or even a CCUS project.
Well, Senator, I guess what I would say, thank you for that question. One of the things that the work that we did in the NEPA provisions was focused on is making sure that we're able to do the analysis that effectively determines what are the impacts that a project is going to cause. If you narrow your focus to such an extent that you are not actually considering the real impacts of a project, that is just setting us up for failure. So our focus has been on making sure that the agencies have the tools to do the necessary analysis, but then to support them in ways that they can do it in a time-efficient manner.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Senator Cardin. Is he on WebEx?
I'm with you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me thank our witness for your work. The infrastructure bill is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for this country. So your role is critically important to make sure we do it right. We were very clear that environmental justice is one of our goals in regards to how we rebuild our infrastructure in America. I was proud that included in this bill was the removal of lead from our water pipe systems, that we have reconnecting communities that have been divided by highways that were destructive to the residential communities. And the list goes on and on. We have resiliency into this, et cetera. My own state of Maryland has a Maryland Environmental Justice Screening Tool. You have the White House Climate and Environmental Screening Tool that's available. Let me ask you how you intend to implement the use of these tools with the opportunities that we have with the infrastructure bill to make sure that we are sensitive to the community's needs, that we recognize that the communities that have been hit the hardest as a result of climate change have been low-income communities. The communities that have been hit the hardest in regards to our efforts to build interstate roads have been our low-income communities. How do you intend to use this opportunity to make sure that, in fact, we carry out our commitment for environmental justice?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that question because the work that CEQ is doing has environmental justice kind of squarely at the center of our priorities. And what the president has directed in the early executive orders, including the specific direction that we do a screening tool, is that we use the tool to help decide how we prioritize the allocation of resources and benefits to communities, to make sure that the folks who have been underserved in the past, whose communities have been underinvested in, are among those that receive the benefits of the federal investment. And that is the goal of the tool. The tool is it's a mapping tool. It allows us to prioritize areas where programs have, that show that communities have high air pollution, that show that the communities have high impacts to climate impacts, that show that there is a high health burdens. And these are the things that are built into deciding how we focus on the communities who need the most help. And our idea is that once the tool is finalized, that this will be a resource that the agencies look to as they're trying to make decisions that relate to their funding.
Well, I hope, I'm very supportive of that. I just hope you'll keep us engaged at every stage. This is a relatively new opportunity that we have, and we want to make sure that we actually take advantage of it. So I would appreciate you keeping our committee informed as to how this tool is in fact working in practice in dealing with these issues. I want to ask you one additional question on America the Beautiful initiative by the administration, and what role you'll play in regards to working with the private sector to expand the lands that are protected through conservation under the America the Beautiful initiative. Will your office play a role in this?
Absolutely. This is one of our central activities. I, in fact, chair a committee working with Secretary Holland, Secretary Vilsack, and Secretary Raimundo. We're managing the America the Beautiful initiative across the government. And the key about the America the Beautiful initiative is that it is the first time a president has set a conservation goal. Our goal here being to conserve 30% of the lands and waters by 2030. And our focus is on making sure that we elevate and lift up the great work that's going on across the country, where people in each community they have identified like what are the important measures of conservation in their communities, and create programs that really help to provide support for those efforts. Last week, in fact, I was in Florida and had the opportunity to see how activities are going on the ground where the public and private sector are working together on some conservation efforts that really reflected exactly what we want America the Beautiful to look like when it is put in place. So the grant program that I announced last week, which was $82 million, that is going to be run through a request for a proposal that brings together funding from several different agencies, is an available resource that communities in the public and private sector can use.
Well, thank you very much, and look forward to the results of your work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Senator Cardin, thanks very much for those.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Senator Inhofe is next. I think he'd be followed by me, and then we'll move along. I think after that, Senator Kramer, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Padilla. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again, as I've already mentioned to you, Chair Mallory. I have two requests, and they're not related to each other. They're separate. Let me start with the first one. And just so there's not any misunderstanding, just what I'm asking for, I'm actually going to read it, so I'll have a record of what I'm saying, all right? DOD is legally responsible for the cleanup of PFAS contamination that they caused. In order to clean up the contamination, they need to dispose of it. The best way to do so is incineration. DOD is ready to incinerate PFAS waste, but has been told by someone in the administration not to do it. The two questions I would have is, first of all, who is telling them that they can't release their incineration guidance? And the second thing is, if they can't incinerate, how do you propose they dispose of PFAS-contaminated minerals? So you're from the right area to respond to those questions, I believe. What would be your response?
Okay, thank you, Senator, for that question. PFAS is obviously a really important issue that the administration is spending a fair amount of time on, and specifically in my office, I am chairing a interagency policy council that is focused on trying to coordinate the PFAS activities that are occurring all across the government. I mean, from the campaign until right when the president issued early executive orders, PFAS and its the need to address it has been a high priority for them. One of the things I'm trying to do within the interagency policy forum is to make sure that the agencies are working together as they are identifying what are the actions and tools that are necessary in order to make sure that we are meeting the challenge of PFAS. I mean, we are in a place with PFAS where the science is still evolving, the standards are still need to be put in place. There are a variety of technical things that need to happen. Meanwhile, there are families and people who are being harmed every day. And so trying to make sure that we're able to move in a way that allows for the agencies to address the issues and address them in a way that is responsive to the kind of health concerns of the community, I think is important. Incineration is an issue. I know EPA and guidance that they issued, I believe it was last year, talked about incineration being kind of among the things where it's an approach, but it's one that we have to be very careful about because of the air quality impacts that are associated with that. And so I know we are talking to DOD about the studies that they have underway and getting additional information about the work in incineration and PFAS, and that is part of an ongoing discussion.
It's my understanding that New York has already crossed that bridge. They've made a statement as to any dangers having to do with this, and so that study has been going on, I assume, for quite some time. And so I just want to find out when this is going to be resolved. I mean, right now, if you leave it the way that you're stating it there, that it's something you don't like in the first place, and therefore it's going to take you a while, I guess. Oh, how long is this going to take so that you'll be able to clean this up?
Well, so first of all, Senator, I think we are spending real effort in trying to get the agencies to work together around this issue. I think that.
But your agency is an agency that has the responsibility to resolve this problem.
And what I'm saying is that we're gathering the information that will make that possible. The New York study that you made reference to, I think that there are other studies that we are not able to make available at this point that DOD has done, and we want to see what those studies look like, which I think will be this summer.
So if this is the only study that has been, is this the only study then that has been publicized?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm happy to get back to you on it.
Well, there's not a lot of time to get back because we have to do something with this. Right now, nothing's being done, and I came to this meeting because it's apparently the White House that is stopping this or delaying. Is it being stopped or delayed? Can you inform me as to the status of this?
What I can say about it, Senator, is that we are having conversations with DOD about this guidance. I did not perceive us as stopping or even delaying that, but we are having conversations with them about what is their plan and what's necessary to address this issue.
But aren't you precluding them from doing the cleanup? What
I asked DOD to do was to pull together the information so that we can have a briefing for everyone about what their plan is. I did not preclude them from doing anything.
All right, then when will that, give me a time frame of this. This is an inconvenience, as you understand, for DOD. We have things that we need to be doing, and we need to be using this technology that has been acceptable, and we just want to get to the bottom of where we are today, how much time it's going to take to accomplish the different things you are trying to determine, and where we're going to be with this.
Well, again, thank you, Senator, for the question. I will definitely get back to you with what the status is. I will say that DOD actually was arranging for, and I think we were assisting in arranging for a meeting. I'm not sure if it's scheduled yet.
All right, I know my time is, I have one other issue I want to talk about, so let me just wind up this one real quick here. You have nothing today that you're going to be able to share with me in terms of when we'll be able to clean up this mess?
No, no, Senator. I will definitely get back to you on that.
And
It
when
might
you-
be today, but it won't be while I'm sitting here.
Well, all right, you've made that clear. How long do you think it would be? Give me a time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I commit to you that today is Wednesday. I commit to you that we'll get back to you certainly by the end of the week on where we are on the issue.
Okay, that's good. Now, my other issue I'll bring up when, on the second round.
Great, that's great. And I would just ask you keep both majority and minority staffs in the loop on your response to Senator Inhofe and his staff on this issue, okay? Thank you very much. I think I'm next. Let me just say I applaud the President's commitment, your commitment as well, to address decades of underinvestment in environmental justice communities. President Biden's Justice 40 initiative sets a lofty goal of delivering 40% of the federal benefits from a variety of programs to low-income, disadvantaged, and minority communities. At the same time, Biden administration, under your leadership, has proposed a climate and economic justice screening tool to help agencies identify disadvantaged communities and address historic injustices. With that said, meaningful historic changes are hard to make overnight, as you know. Here's my question. Briefly, please share with us some of the achievements that CEQ has made in advancing environmental justice under your leadership, and expand on the challenges you are facing to ensure the goals of Justice 40 are met across the federal government. And if you'd like to suggest a couple of ways we can be of help, please let us know that. Go right ahead.
Great. Thank you, Senator, for that question. As I said earlier, the environmental justice part of the President's agenda is central to the work that we're doing at CEQ, and it is personally a very high priority for me in terms of meeting this long challenge. Under the President's direction, there are a number of things that we were directed to do in order to really put in place the infrastructure that would allow us on a regular basis to think about, to make sure that we are considering what the impacts of federal actions are on all communities. I mean, ultimately, what we want to achieve in our environmental justice work is an assurance that every American, no matter where they live, can count on having clean air, clean water, and healthy communities, and that we are doing our part as federal servants to try to deliver on that. So the President instructed us to create a White House Advisory Council in which we have a regular interaction with 25 experts and academics in the field who have been working in environmental justice for many years, to get their input, their reaction about things that need to be addressed as part of our policy making. We created a White House Environmental Interagency Council so that the senior leadership all across the agencies comes together and has an opportunity to discuss what's each agency doing to try to meet the President's goals, and how we collectively can work together to make sure that we are accomplishing the mission. Then the creation of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool is obviously one of the central pieces to help us deliver on the President's commitment to do a Justice 40 initiative, which is the 40% commitment. And the way that we're carrying that out is to finalize the tool, but then working with all of the agencies as part of Justice 40 to make sure that they have the approaches for identifying how within specific programs they would need to make adjustments in order to carry that out, what the methodologies are, what the best benefits are. So all of that work has been going on since July of 2021. And Justice 40 is up and running in the way that we are approaching our implementation of programs, even as we are trying to finalize the tool. But more importantly, and I think what would be more is going to be impactful is that within each of the agencies, the leadership and the rank and file career folks who are working there are now getting into the habit of thinking about more directly, how will this affect all communities? How will this affect the specific communities that are often not on people's minds in terms of what impacts are? And I think that is actually one of the successes of the work so far.
All right. Sometimes folks ask me, what do you mean by environmental justice? Why are they making such a big deal about it? And Senator Inhofe and I have been for years on Thursdays around noon participating in the same Bible study. And our chaplain is Barry Black, as our colleagues know. He's a retired Navy admiral, former chief of chaplains, the Navy and Marine Corps. He's always reminding us of the importance of the golden rule, treating other people the way we want to be treated. I think he once said that it's the only rule that's in every major religion in the world. Everyone, that we ought to treat other people the way we want to be treated. And I think that certainly applies with respect to clean air, clean water, and protection from all this climate crisis that we're witnessing. So thank you. With that, my time has expired, and I'm going to yield happily to Senator Kramer for his questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chair Mallory, for being here. Again, thank you for the hearing, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for teeing up that question, because I want to elaborate on it a little bit, ask you to as well. Because I'm looking at the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council's Justice 40, some of the conclusions that they drew, and it's going to get me to my first question. Some of the conclusions, for example, examples of the types of projects that will not benefit a community. Here's a list from your fossil fuel procurement, development, infrastructure repair that would in any way extend lifespan or production capacity, transmission system investments to facilitate fossil-fired generation or any related subsidy, highway expansion, that certainly wouldn't help any community, road improvements or automobile infrastructure other than electric vehicle charging stations. Really? Industrial scale bioenergy, God forbid that would happen in a community. That certainly wouldn't be good. So, critical to me in these discussions, so around social justice and what's not good for the community. I've been participating, a number of us have, in a bipartisan discussion right now as we speak these weeks on trying to find a bipartisan energy environment and energy climate plan that we could agree on, that would forward reliable power, whether it's for vehicles or for electricity, at the same time meeting certain goals. I think you've been talking in circles, frankly, but I think I understand you just try to find a balance. You're talking about balance, right? We have demands. We have an economic demand. We have national security demands. We have Europe pleading with us for our natural resources because they've voluntarily cut themselves off of Russia's natural resources. But critical to all of this, in my mind, is a prioritization of commercialization of emerging technologies. Emerging technologies, particularly in the power sector, that would also reduce emissions. Technologies like carbon capture, utilization, and storage, listed as one of the things that don't help communities, for example. Direct air capture, also listed in the White House document as something that doesn't help communities. Emission-free nuclear power generation. I don't know how you could want to advance nuclear or advance cleaner energy and not be for nuclear. Anyway, so I want to remind you that President Biden's emission goals say that carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and nuclear are critical components to reaching the targets. And then you have this Environmental Justice Advisory report stating they believe CCUS will not benefit communities. And CEQ says environmental justice considerations must be incorporated into all permitting decisions. Some who see these really are left with some pretty obvious questions. Does the administration actually support CCUS and nuclear? Do they actually support all communities, or are there only certain communities? And if so, why are they simultaneously making it harder for these types of projects to get permitted? Help me find the balance here.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, thank you for the question, Senator. I appreciate what you're struggling with. I mean, one of the things that the president is trying to do through the environmental justice work, and I think was critical in his interaction with the communities during the campaign and that was reflected in early executive orders, is he wants the authentic voices of communities to be heard, to be elevated, to be part of the conversation. And what you read, the recommendations that we heard from the Environmental Justice Advisory Council, that is their reflection of their authentic voices. That doesn't mean that every single item there, the president shares exactly that view with. He has also been very clear, I think, through the campaign, throughout early activities, that we think that technology is an important part of the solution for decarbonizing the environment, that we have to not only work hard to reduce the emissions of carbon, but we also are probably not going to be able to do it sufficiently without removing, having some technology that can help remove environment. So I think the president has been clear about what his views are on that.
I don't think it's clear at all. I think it's very confusing, quite honestly. I don't think there's anything clear about it. What I'd like, I wonder if anybody, when they do these surveys or they're talking to these communities, if they ever ask the question, how would it be if your natural gas gets turned off in the middle of winter? Or how about the air conditioning gets turned off because there's no electricity because God forbid we have nuclear power or carbon capture utilization on a coal-fired power plant, and we're only going to rely on the wind on the days that it blows. I mean, what is the process for coming up with crazy? I mean, frankly, this is like cartoonish. This Justice 40 document. So I don't think the president's clear at all. I think the president sends confusing messages. I think investors see them as confusing, if not hostile, quite honestly. I prefer him to remain committed to carbon capture, utilization, storage, and nuclear, frankly, as parts of the solution. I'll get to some more questions in another round. Thank you.
Before I turn to Senator Whitehouse has not returned yet. So I think maybe we're going to go to Senator Padilla next. Is that correct? Before I do that, let me just say, my colleague knows
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on just for a second, please. Let me say to Senator Kramer. Senator Kramer, I think you know how strongly I feel about nuclear. Old Navy guy, 70 years have been doing nuclear in the Navy, and I think you have an idea as the Navy of West Virginia what I think about CCUS. So I think we're poised to do good things there.
I don't worry about you.
Thank you. I wish more people felt that way.
I don't even worry about Senator Whitehouse.
All right.
I rather like him.
Senator Whitehouse has rejoined us. Okay, and I think after him, I think maybe it's Senator Loomis. Maybe after Sheldon. Senator Whitehouse, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. First, responding to some of the comments we've heard here, yes to helping Europe disconnect from Russian fossil fuel. The Ukraine war is a fossil fuel-powered war that sends important messages about the danger of this international industry. And for national security reasons, totally yes to helping Europe get off fossil fuel. But let's remember that there is no American energy security in oil and gas. It can't happen. It can't happen for the very simple reason that the price of oil and gas is not set here in America. It's set by an international cartel of Iran and Venezuela and Russia and Saudi Arabia and others, and a horde of speculators who surround them. And every day the American oil and gas industry has the choice whether to set their prices based on their cost of production here in America, or whether to ride the cartel prices way up into the stratosphere and pocket billions and billions and billions of dollars in excess profits, and every day they choose that. We could knock $1 off the price of gasoline tomorrow if President Biden had the authority to, and they'd still make money. That's how grotesque the excess profits are, and it's a choice that the oil and gas industry makes, not to follow market price based on cost of production, but to follow international cartel price. And I hope we take a good hard look at that in the future. With respect to carbon capture, a place where we have done a lot of good work in this committee First of all, thank you for your interim guidance. I think that's a very good start. We need carbon capture for the very simple reason that we're going to miss the 1.5 degree safety threshold. We are going to overshoot, and going to zero carbon doesn't get you back once you've overshot. So we need these technologies, we need to develop them, and we also need to make sure that communities that have been burdened by pollution understand that this is not another end run around their concerns. So thank you for your focus on environmental justice. Thank you for the screening tool, which I've used for Rhode Island. It's very accessible and easy to use. I'm grateful to you for it, and thank you for the focus that we have to engage communities in order to succeed, and in particular with carbon capture, we have to engage communities. I think the question of NEPA reform and moving forward efficiently is a very important one. To me, the lesson is the sooner you can engage the conflicting uses, the better. We did this with offshore wind in Rhode Island, as you may know. We had a very good process that got all the users together with really good data from University of Rhode Island. And because our process was good, we got the first steel in the water, the first electrons on the grid. We showed that you could site offshore wind in America. And now there's this explosion that President Biden is counting on for 30 gigawatts of clean and renewable energy. But it's going to happen a lot quicker if you get the lesson right, which is that all the conflicting users have to be brought together as soon as possible. I don't know if you've been following what BOEM did, but they got off to a terrible start with Vineyard Wind. It stubbed the toe of the whole offshore wind movement because they had not done that. They had not gotten everybody in the room who was a conflicting user. They had instead tried to roll communities. And now, with the progress going forward, BOEM has been better. They've moved the conflict identification forward. The New York BITE process has been much, much, much improved. So we're really, I think, gaining ground. But to me, the lesson is that the process can't be one that is designed to steamroll communities and people who will be victims of pollution, but one that hears them early so that their concerns can be taken into consideration as quickly as possible. And I hope that's the theory that will guide you. We are trying to improve carbon capture and carbon removal by creating a market for it. As you know, it's free to pollute. The fossil fuel industry fights incredibly hard every day to make sure that it's free for them to pollute and dump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in tons and tons and tons and tons and tons, and let everybody else pick up the tab for those bad effects. So we'll be launching very soon a bill to give the Department of Energy a role buying carbon removal to jumpstart the market and move these technologies forward in addition to the 45Q support that we've given. And I hope you'll take a look at that bill, and I hope you can round up administration support for it. It's called the Federal Carbon Dioxide Removal Leadership Act. So with that, congratulations to you on the CCUS work, congratulations on the environmental justice work, congratulations on the screening tool, and good luck making sure that our regulatory siting issues are dealt with in a way that does not steamroll local communities, but rather efficiently resolves the conflicts that they inevitably produce. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I would just like to emphasize that the permitting action plan that we issued this morning is designed to do exactly what you're saying, is to take the best lessons that we've learned, to use the senior leadership across the government to work together to make sure that we are organizing our work on individual actions to bring people together and resolve issues. I think that's hugely important. And on the CCUS front, I think we absolutely are, as an administration, supporting CCUS as a technology. The president has been clear on that. I think that we have to work harder to make sure that CCUS does not end up harming communities. And that's what they care about. That's what they're worried about. They're worried because they are often the afterthought, and as a result, they have concerns that that is what people are thinking about now, and we're trying really hard to avoid that.
And that's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me say, as we used to say in the House of Representatives, colleagues, want to associate myself with the words of the senator from Rhode Island. Senator, I want to submit for the record the unanimous consent to request, unanimous consent to submit for the record materials describing the cause of the volatility in global energy markets, including a memorandum from an MIT economist discussing 3 conclusions, which I will not elaborate on right here. And I think Senator Inhofe has a UC as well.
One request, and that would be that I can submit for the record my second question.
Without objection. Awarded. Thank you. And I think with that, we're ready to hear from Senator Lummis, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chair Mallory, for being here. I'm hearing a total disconnect between what the senator from Rhode Island just said and what the administration is doing. So I'm going to ask you the question now, but then I want a few minutes to vent before you answer it. So here's the question. In May of last year, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council released a report that said carbon capture is among the types of projects that will not benefit a community, And yet the senator from Rhode Island, member of your own party and a tremendous advocate for environmental justice, believes just the opposite. There's a disconnect in your own party among people who are real advocates for environmental justice. So here's what I'm going to say in way of venting, but that's my question. You know, everything that you do at CEQ relates to the West, everything you do. And it makes a difference for us on whether we have enough electricity in our homes via transmission lines. It impacts our ability to fight wildfires, to commute to work on road and bridges in massively large states. So it's a huge consequence. It's because of NEPA that I wanted to serve on this committee. It is that important to our state. It affects us that much. So I'm really disheartened by this administration's actions in rolling back what were common sense reforms made by the last administration. So let me paint a picture as I see it. Americans are facing the highest inflation in 40 years. The cost of the average household of this inflation is $5,200 annually. There's this sense of frustration and doom, and some say magical thinking about inflation as it relates to the way this administration looks at it, and that was reported in Bloomberg yesterday. Gas prices hit a brand new record high. The average American's paying $2,000 more per year just for gasoline, and it's higher in my big state of Wyoming. Americans are looking at the stock market and their 401ks with horror. On top of that, our nation is facing a supply chain crisis. There's a nationwide shortage of baby formula. Brownouts are being discussed as possibilities in our energy sector. And CEQ, through its permitting regulations, are a key player in addressing these challenges. And CEQ's answer has been more government, more red tape, more bureaucracy. So that's the kind of magical thinking in response to all of these problems our nation's having right now that I just think has got to stop. Now listen to this. Terry Sullivan, the president of the Laborers International Union of North America, said it best concerning CEQ's latest actions. This is a huge labor union talking about CEQ's latest actions. The rollback of updates to the National Environmental Policy Act reinstate burdensome requirements that will cause excessive permit delays and allow project adversaries to use frivolous lawsuits to disrupt or upend long overdue construction. Once again, communities in need of vital infrastructure and the hardworking men and women who build America will be waiting as project details are subjected to onerous reviews. Americans will continue to bear the expense of NEPA-related delays, which cost taxpayers millions of dollars annually. Lengthy review processes and unpredictable legal challenges are also having a chilling impact on private investment in infrastructure. So this Congress puts out a big infrastructure bill. People on this committee worked hard on it, including the chair and the ranking member, to get infrastructure moving in this country. And what does CEQ do? It slows it down. It throws up roadblocks. It puts up delays. It makes this country move slower and more expensively. It takes projects longer. They're more expensive. And our ability to respond to the demand for infrastructure is being roadblocked by CEQ, by the White House. This is you give with one hand and you take away with the other. And the American people know it. So the frustration level is high with me. It's high with the labor unions. And I want to tell you, then when you move to this report on carbon capture, again, this report says carbon capture is among the types of projects that will not benefit a community. So what I'm just saying is the frustration is what we're trying to do as a Congress is just being thwarted at every turn by what you all are doing in the White House. This is the expression of frustration that you're hearing at this table today. I haven't given you enough time because I needed to unload on you. But while I turn over the questioning to the next member of the committee, I may submit some questions for the record because I am 100% confused about what this administration's goals are. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I'll be very quick because I know the time is over, but I did want to say a couple of really quick things. First of all, on the idea about what NEPA is, what we're doing for the NEPA program, those changes that we made are fundamental to ensuring that, in fact, we actually assess the impacts. Like, if we are not able to look at the impacts, then we're moving forward on very expensive projects, spending a lot of money, as you all authorized, and we're doing it without the right information. So that's number one. That is critical to what we're doing. Those were not common sense changes that occurred. Secondly, I think it's important to separate out the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council recommendations from the president. I mean, the president is setting forth what he believes to be important key elements for our strategy, which includes the investments in technology on carbon capture, which includes thinking about removal as a technique. The communities don't like it because they have decades of experience, even some would say centuries of experience, of people not doing projects in a way that is beneficial to them or that even takes into consideration their potential harms. And I think that's the thing that we have to address.
Senator Markey, I believe you are next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. First, I'd like to associate my remarks with those of Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Chair Mallory, I want to applaud the work that you have done so far in releasing an initial version of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. As the Senate author of the Environmental Justice Mapping and Data Collection Act, along with Congresswoman Cori Bush in the House, this has been a longstanding priority of mine. Low-income and disadvantaged communities, especially those overburdened by pollution, deserve justice and targeted relief from polluted air and water. Some stakeholders in the movement for environmental justice have expressed concern that the tool does not explicitly screen for race and could overlook thousands of disadvantaged census tracts as a result. Others have asked for a system that looks at how burdens interact in order to paint a picture of the cumulative impacts on a community. Chair Mallory, how is the Council on Environmental Quality continuing to work to take these and other stakeholder concerns into account as it continues the development of the screening tool?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I appreciate it. And as I've said already, the work that we're doing on environmental justice is really central to the work that CEQ is doing, and the screening tool is a very important factor in that. The way that we have structured the screening tool is directly related to the types of programs that are going to be affected by the distribution of resources. The Justice 40 initiative is about looking at clean energy projects, about climate change related projects, about some affordable housing issues. And so what we did is to establish criteria that really focus on those issues within the community. So we're identifying communities that have high health burdens. We're identifying communities where the climate change impacts seem to be high. We're identifying communities with low education. All of these factors will actually allow us to focus on the disinvestment that we think is critical for making sure that the underserved communities are addressed.
Can I just add, so the initial version of the climate and economic justice screening tool has many regions for which there is little or no data, including in tribal communities and U.S. territories. We can't help protect all communities if we don't understand all communities. So are you now going to be filling in the gaps to make sure that all of that information is in fact gathered so that those communities can be served?
So one of the things that we did when we announced that we were doing the screening tool or putting out the beta version of it is that we're going to have a NAS study that is helping us with data sets. We know that there are data gaps. We went on the data, we used the data that was available at a national level to really set up the beginning of the tool, but we know that we need more data, and that is part of the effort that will go on even after we release what will be the final, or at least the operating tool.
So after the information is developed, the communities are going to need more than just money or proclamations. They need a seat at the table in order to make sure the government gets this right. How will CEQ support ongoing community interaction with this tool?
I mean, I think that we have been actually making ourselves available with a number of members of the community, and also creating folks who can serve as ambassadors for helping to work with the community on how to use the tool, on what's necessary in order to operate it. We know that technical assistance is very important as it relates to communities, and that is something that that I think that we are working with our agency partners to make sure occurs.
So you're saying that there will be a way for community members themselves to report their needs for investments in certain areas and comment on the current status of Justice 40 related programs in their area?
Yes, absolutely. And even the tool created, actually on the tool itself, allows for people to be able to submit information if they think we've missed something.
That is great, thank you. And just so important, thank you for your great work on this issue. And Chair Mallory, I applaud the CEQ's new final Phase 1 rule to restore the potential of the NEPA process to protect human health and the environment. The National Environment Policy Act is our bedrock statute for bringing the public good into the federal decision-making process. The public good is not slowing down good decision-making. It enables it. For example, delays in permits for mines are more likely due to plan changes from the applicant than from the NEPA process itself. So, for example, on LNG exports, FERC has already permitted facilities that could move 28 billion cubic feet per day of liquid natural gas, facilities that that so far have not yet been built, but that's not a NEPA problem, getting them constructed, but NEPA has already, the work has already been done to get them permitted. So sometimes I hear, concerns, but LNG is a big issue, and it's already permitted. And for the small subset of federal projects that require full environmental impact statements, those projects are longer lasting and better for the fact that the public could weigh in and understand what's happening in their community. Just like on a grade school test, NEPA means big corporations have to show their work in order to get an A. And that's all NEPA really requires, that the work be produced, that it can be examined and it can be done in a timely fashion. So I just want to, just say, I think you're doing a great job on this, because without a working NEPA process, small business owners, local community leaders, concerned parents, or other stakeholders would not be able to weigh in on these massive federal projects. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I think that is what we are trying to focus on, is particularly with the release of the permitting action plan today, is to really highlight how we can make the process work with the values of ensuring that we're doing impact analysis.
And you're making sure disadvantaged communities can have their voices heard.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The senator's time has expired. Senator Sullivan's next. He's en route to join us, but when he arrives, we'll be sure to work him into the lineup. I think Senator Padilla may be with us by WebEx. Is that, Alex, you out there anywhere?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Recognize Senator Padilla. And if Senator Sullivan
Jump right into it. 5 minutes goes by fast. Last week, the Department of Justice made several important announcements in support of the administration's new environmental justice enforcement strategy, and it certainly was welcome news. Part of that effort is one that I've been pushing for the department to do, which is to create a dedicated environmental justice office within the Department of Justice to better hold polluters accountable and to support historically marginalized communities, as Senator Markey has just been discussing. I was also pleased to see that the Department of Justice finally issued an interim final rule to restore the use of supplemental environmental projects, also known as SEPs, in certain settlements. Now, this is an important tool because SEPs serve as an essential environmental justice function. They provide tangible, real-world projects in the low-income communities of color, in many cases, who would otherwise be forced to deal with the pollution that's left behind by bad actors on their own. The restoration of SEPs is just one tool that we have in the toolbox. It's great to have it back, and we need more to correct injustices in overburdened communities. So with that being said, my question, Chair Mallory, is can you talk about other tools in the toolbox to invest in historically marginalized communities and what the council is doing to help right these historical wrongs?
So yes, Senator, thank you for that question. And yes, environmental justice is obviously central to the work that we are doing. I can talk about several of the steps that we've already taken. But the underlying message as to all of the work we're doing is just trying to make sure that all communities get the benefit of the environmental protection network ecosystem that exists in this country, that everybody has the benefit of clean air, clean water, and a livable community. And so the president's direction to us has been focused on getting the voices in the White House so that we know what people are thinking, and we're doing that through the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. We're also doing that in every time that I go out and visit a community, I make a point to ensure that I'm meeting local representatives from different environmental justice organizations who can talk to me specifically about what they are experiencing and how they see the work that CEQ and the White House is doing and can be more helpful. So that's a very important tool. I think other agencies are doing similar things. If you are tracking any of the work that the Department of Energy or EPA or the Department of Transportation are doing, they are regularly interacting with the communities who are affected by their programs to find out how those communities are both feeling what the administration is doing and planning, but also how we as an administration can be helpful in ensuring that the work that we are doing actually has a positive benefit for everyone. And so that's a very important mechanism that we're using. And then I think within the federal government itself, the Environmental Justice, the White House Interagency Council is a really important mechanism for making sure that we all know what agencies are doing and can both use the good examples of individual agencies to encourage and inspire work around the federal family, but also to make sure that everybody is aware of how we're taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented by the bipartisan infrastructure law as an example, how we're taking advantage of that opportunity to make sure that good benefits are reached all American people. So those are the mechanisms that we're using.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the minute I have left, I do have a follow-up question on this topic, but I will submit in writing questions as it pertains to the America the Beautiful framework and questions about inclusiveness, what we're doing to ensure input from a variety of stakeholders, questions as it pertains to PFAS cleanup that's been brought up earlier in the hearing, and federal procurement opportunities to advance an environmental justice agenda as well. But the one specific in my time remaining, talking about additional tools in the toolbox. You know, when somebody's lost or going somewhere they've never been before, we need one of two things: good directions or a map. And I put it simply there because in the state of California, the state has led when it comes to mapping tools for environmental justice with its tool known as Cal EnviroScreen. It's identifying how California communities by census tract are disproportionately burdened by and vulnerable to multiple sources of pollution. So I think it's a great model for something that we can and understand we're in development as a federal tool at the national level. Chair Mallory, can you just briefly describe how the council can help implement a climate and economic justice screening tool?
Thank you for the question. And what I would say to that quickly is just that when we were developing our own tool, we very much recognize that California and New York and several other states have their own tools that are in use, and we collaborated with folks who were involved in those processes to both learn what the positive benefits we could take and sort of scale to a national level, but also some of the challenges that they've faced and how that might affect federal programs. So that is the work that has been done in California as in other states is very much front of mind on folks as they were developing the tool.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Senator Kelly, I'm going to ask you to wait for Senator Sullivan. It's his turn. Welcome, Senator Sullivan. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then I believe next would be Senator Kelly. I'm going to run and vote and leave the committee in good hands with the gentlewoman to my right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Chair, thank you for being here. I'm going to follow up on the questioning that a lot of us have that Senator Lummis started, and that's on this new NEPA reg. And I think, A, there's very much disappointment in CEQ, what they're doing with this. B, if you talk to the average governor or mayor in America, it doesn't matter if they're Democrat, Republican, I guarantee you they're against this. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit this Wall Street Journal editorial. If it hasn't already been submitted, How to Kill American Infrastructure on the Sly. The White House revises NEPA rules that will scuttle new roads, bridges, and oil and gas pipelines.
Without objection.
So here's the issue, and it's a broader issue, and it's way before you came, but I am firmly of the view when the National Democrats get in power and they have a choice between the working men and women who build things in America, like the laborers, I'm going to quote from them like Senator Lummis did, and the radical elite environmental groups, coastal elites, they always side with the radical far-left environmental groups. And the working men and women always get the shaft. The Democratic Party used to say they're the party of the working men and women. They are definitely not anymore. The head of the laborers said they oppose this. Rollback of the updates to the NEPA reinstate burdensome requirements that will cause excessive permit delays and allow project adversaries to use frivolous lawsuits to disrupt and upend long overdue construction. Once again, I'm still quoting from him, communities in need of vital infrastructure and the hard-working men and women who build America will be waiting as project details are subjected to onerous reviews. He goes on to oppose this. Why did you not listen to the laborers on this? Because you clearly didn't.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As I've been saying today, I mean, our focus and the President's focus as we are moving forward and the work that we're doing on the National Environmental Policy Act is to make sure that we're taking advantage of good science.
No,
that
no,
we
no,
are
you
doing
guys,
analysis.
let me interrupt, I'm sorry, but you guys always fall back on science, and it drives me nuts. Let me give you another example. The National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, set aside by Congress for oil and gas development 2 weeks ago, through an executive order, you took half of that off the table. Almost 8 million acres of some of the most prospective oil and gas land in the country. It's not even controversial. You guys took it off the table. You cited science. It's ridiculous, okay? So don't fall back on science, with all due respect. Why did you not listen to the laborers who clearly oppose this? What about the statement from the laborers did you disagree with?
Mr. Sullivan and Senator Sullivan, I guess what I would say is, I will fall back on science because it is about science. I will fall back on good government because it's about good government.
Yeah,
I will fall back on making sure you look before you leap, because
Delaying
that's what
infrastructure is not good government.
It's
right?
not about
I voted
delaying
for the infrastructure bill. Senator Capito voted for the infrastructure bill. This completely undermines the ability to build infrastructure. The people who build it, like the laborers, agree with my position. Let me ask another thing. When you talk about good governance, your rule says agencies have to analyze, compile reports on indirect and cumulative effects, quote, aesthetic, historical, cultural, economic, social, and health impacts for every single major federal action. Where is the limiting principle where you have to focus on, quote, aesthetic, historical, cultural, economic, social, and health impacts? Could any EIS survive a challenge when you are literally saying you have to focus on everything? I mean, what's the limiting principle here? This is an invitation for radical, far-left environmental groups to sue. And that's exactly what this is. Help me on good governance with, quote, aesthetic, historical, cultural, economic, social, and health impacts. Who the heck can do that for every project in America?
Senator,
That's your language.
That is, yes, and it sounds like it's coming directly out of the statute itself. But the limiting principle is reasonably foreseeable impacts. That is what we are focusing on.
How can you reasonably foresee aesthetic, historical, cultural, economic, social, and health impacts for every project?
It's not as hard as it may sound if you talk about it in the abstract. No, it is not.
How can you do an EIS that fits that principle?
It's done every day, Senator. I mean, there are professionals who know the environmental area and how you do an analysis, and it's
Let
done
me just
every
ask
day.
one, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I'd like to go back to the question is, why did you ignore the laborers' very significant, substantial comments? These are the men and women who are going to build America infrastructure. They know what they're talking about. Why did you ignore their concerns?
We did not ignore them, I will say. And
You
the
did.
reason that we issued a permitting action plan today is because we are trying to balance those two things. How do we get projects done exponentially, but also done in a way that we are actually doing the analysis necessary? We're not ignoring them. We're trying to do it in a way that makes sense.
You've ignored it, right? They were against your rule.
That may be, but it was not because they were ignored. We definitely heard their comments. We talked to them. We've talked to them in different ways to try to make sure that we are ensuring that the projects go forward in an expeditious way.
Senator Kelly.
Ms. Mallory, thank you for being here today. I want to discuss, as I have a number of times before this committee, the effect of a 20-year-long drought in the western United States. While a drought of this magnitude is unprecedented, I know that if we act quickly enough, we can advance some solutions which can guarantee water security in Arizona and the rest of the West. That's why I worked really hard to ensure that the bipartisan infrastructure law included $8 billion for Western water infrastructure. And I'm glad to see that the Bureau of Reclamation is already dispersing some of this funding, with projects in the Yuma area receiving funding just this week to upgrade canals and some pipelines. We're also seeing innovative solutions throughout the West, like water reuse and plans for some desalination facilities, which can help boost our scarce water supplies. But time's critical here. In a years-long NEPA approval process for a pipeline carrying desalinated water or delayed updates to a dam's flood control manual can have some real consequences to our water security. So, Ms. Mallory, can you share how the regulatory actions undertaken by the Council on Environmental Quality in recent months will help ensure that projects which conserve or bolster scarce water reserves in the western United States are able to move through the environmental review and permitting process quickly and efficiently?
Yes, Senator, thank you very much for that question. As I've been saying with NEPA, the goal of the very targeted changes that we made to NEPA last month is to make sure that we are looking at the important suite of impacts that really are going to affect a project. So, for example, on any project that has to do with water in an area where drought is so profound, we're going to want to make sure that that analysis is actually fully considering not only the direct impacts of what is being built, but also like what are going to be the repercussions of that. And so what we're doing in the rule itself was to just make sure that we get that on the table. The work that we've done in the permitting action plan and other mechanisms that the government has used are designed to help move things in the expeditious way that you're talking about, that are designed to bring the senior leadership to the table to help resolve some of the sticking points that may come up on your projects. I don't know your specific projects that you were referencing, but like the idea is that we know that there are times at which we have to have everybody engaged and involved in coming to the solutions that are necessary to resolve those projects. And those are the things that we think will help resolve your concerns.
So hypothetical desal plant somewhere in the western United States requires a hypothetical pipeline to ship the water some distance. Could you give me an estimate for how long that NEPA process that you would hope that would take?
Yeah. So I can't give you a specific an estimate on that. I mean, I think the goal is that we are striving to make the projects go as quickly as possible given those circumstances. Your project is obviously going to be very different than a narrow project that doesn't transgress over large areas of land and that have impacts on a number of species along the ways. Those are going to be slightly different projects than a more narrow one. But I think the goal is to, at the beginning of the project, to identify what we think is necessary in order to complete the project, to give an estimate on what we think the timeline is going to be. That is what we're committing to in the permitting action plan, that we're going to lay out a schedule, and then to work with the parties who are involved in it to try to make sure that we can meet that expeditiously. That is our plan.
The one federal decision rule, I believe it targets less than 2 years to get something through permitting. Would you expect this process to take less than 2 years on new infrastructure in Arizona that would help solve our water issues?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is it depends, right? It really depends on the circumstances, whether there's other information that's available that doesn't require you to redo analysis, like there's existing analysis that can be used. The circumstances will really affect it. Our goal is to try to identify a schedule that will allow you to move as quickly as possible, and that might be 2 years. That might be under 2 years. I mean, that is the goal. And then to try to use the accountability and oversight mechanisms to keep people on track.
Well, thank you.
Well, I think that concludes our first round, probably, and in waiting for the chairman to come back, I will take his spot and go ahead and start with the second round that I have. In a filing to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission last year, the EPA, quote, recommended that attention should be paid to the costly irreversibility of constructing natural gas pipelines. EPA stated, quote, an important question to consider is whether pipeline construction will lock in natural gas production and use at the expense of substitute energy sources with lower social costs. And I would remind you that according to the WHEJAC, some of those projects that would be eliminated would be the CCUS projects, the direct air capture projects, nuclear projects. I'm very concerned to see a similar line of thinking incorporated into the NEPA regulatory changes that you signed last month. Under those regulations, the government defines the purpose or need of a project under NEPA and can override a project developer's purpose. As I understand it, under the new regulations, an energy company could request permits for a natural gas plant, and the federal government could instead say, through the NEPA review, that solar generation should be developed instead, regardless of what the business case is. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
Again, thank you, Senator. I mean, I think we've, obviously, you know how important that this issue is for CEQ and for the president. So I appreciate the attention that we're getting. I guess what I would say about that particular provision, what we were trying to address is the reality that various factors go into identifying what is the reasonable alternative or range of alternatives that should be considered. And what the previous administration did is they made a change that made that made that scope very dependent on what the applicant said it was. And I think all we're saying is that this is sort of a public statement. This is what the agency sees as the available reasonable options that should be analyzed, even if it would mean that this particular applicant isn't the applicant who would do the permit. So I don't know, the answer to your questions is the circumstances really would depend, but that sounds to me like that is, that something like that would be different than what I would expect the agency to ask.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. From what your explanation was, it sounded to me like the answer to that was yes, that the determination could be made that the applicants or the applicant's idea or purpose could be to provide more power to a certain area, and that the method by which that's delivered through the through that developer's and private entity could shift. But I'll shift to another question here. One of the key project delivery provisions of IIJA, I talked about this, was the codification of one federal decision for major transportation projects. In today's fact sheet on permitting action plan, you state that the IIJA's provisions, quote, enhance efficiency, accountability, and predictability, and will provide the tools needed to ensure timely and sound delivery of these historic investments. You seem to recognize that the critical role one federal decision plays in the environmental rule review and permitting process. So as you move forward to phase 2 of your update for NEPA, do you commit to keeping the elements of the one federal decision as part of these regulations?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, I think what I can commit to you on a rulemaking process, Senator, is that we will certainly have discussions about what is included in that rule and reflect the fact that you've made this request. I can't commit
I think you really have to follow the law here.
Absolutely.
The law, it is in the law.
It is in the law, and we are following it. I guess what I'm saying is whether it is part of the broader rule that will go beyond what the bipartisan infrastructure law covered is the issue.
Yeah, I mean, you stated we're going to be building a lot. If we don't, we're not going to be building a lot if we don't stick with these a lot efficiently. And as we see with inflation and everything else, this is a real issue. Time is money here, and I think it's very concerning. You know, I would like to go to, I come from a state that has economic challenges. As you know, we talked about this. We have communities of real downturn and hopelessness. And the statistics that just came out on drug deaths today, I read 108,000, I think it was, Americans lost their lives. Unfortunately, our state is subject to some of that. I think that a broader view of what's going to bring people out of poverty needs to be taken here by the administration. I understand the clean air and the clean water, and that is what we all want. But at the same time, to exclude a highway expansion, a community might not have a way out. I know certainly in Senator Sullivan's case, in many of the communities in Alaska, they have no infrastructure to move, to progress, in some cases, both on the water and on the transportation. So I think a broader view of how this can open up communities and pull people out of poverty, which is ill health and everything else, drug addiction and everything else that goes along with that sometimes, is what I think a lot of us are trying to make the point that you can't exclude communities who have been treated poorly and that we want to have them treated like the golden rule, you have to have all the options on the table here. And I know you said we got to listen to these communities, and I know you're listening to the communities, but there's conversations that go on with the communities who want to have cheaper energy, who want to have the availability of power costs that are going to be reliable and that are going to be there for them and for their children when they grow up in and around. You know, I'm from a small area. A lot of our folks don't want to move from where they are. So the solutions, I think that's the frustration that I feel as listening to the testimony, is the narrowing of the view of it almost gives me an impression of, I know better what's for you than what you know is good for yourself. And so I would just ask you to kind of take that thought with you as part of my impressions today. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so thank you, Senator. I appreciate your making those comments. I mean, first of all, I just want to be clear again. I feel like people are equating all of our views with the views that were expressed to us by the environmental justice advocates. And we believe that those are views that we have to consider along with other views as well. I mean, I think that we're not just limiting what we think and how we behave simply to recommendations. We are trying to make sure that those recommendations are part of the process of thinking how we move forward. But I am making an effort, and I think other members of the administration as well, to get out and reach out and talk to all communities. It's not like just we're simply limited to our experts that are, interacting with us through the advisory council. I think in our interactions with other people, we are listening to other people and we are hearing different views. I mean, this is a big country, and in different regions, people have different ideas about what's the best approach, and I think we're trying to take all of that into account.
Thank you for presiding over this hearing while I had run and vote. I think we have some more votes coming up. This is my second round, and I would like to lead it off by giving you the opportunity, if you want to respond to some of the questions that Senator Sullivan raised that you may not have had a chance to respond to earlier. If you want to take that opportunity, it's yours.
I'm not sure that there was much new to add. As I was trying to say to the senator, I mean, I think basically on the issues of carbon capture and sequestration, which is obviously something that we talked a little bit about, and how that is an important part of the president's agenda, and how we are approaching that issue. I think I don't know that there's new things to say on that. I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that we invest in the technology and conduct it in a way that we are not harming people who are living near or are close to related facilities, and that is as important a consideration as everything else in the planning. And so that is really the main point that I was trying to reflect.
All right. I'm not going to dwell on carbon capture sequestrations, which is something that I'm strongly interested in, as are other Democrats and Republicans. I would note that the issue of regenerative agriculture. In my state, we raise a lot of chickens, a lot of soybeans, a lot of corn, a lot of lima beans and stuff. And we're always concerned about overdevelopment in our state. We have these beautiful beaches in southern Delaware, and there's a lot of interest, people to live in southern Delaware, and they want to developers want to overdevelop southern Delaware. So we're always looking for ways to keep farmers on the land, and one of the ways to do that is to make sure they have greater income by having more fertile soil, and regenerative agriculture is something we're hugely interested in, as are the farmers. And so I would just share that with you. We'll come back later on and talk about it. Okay. My next question would be, last month the Columbia Journal of Environmental Law published a study on NEPA's implementation at the U.S. Forest Service. The study reviewed they actually reviewed, I think, over 40,000 NEPA decisions completed by the U.S. Forest Service between 2004 and 2020, over 40,000 decisions by the U.S. Forest Service between those years, and uncovered that one of the biggest hurdles to quick or timely environmental reviews is lack of agency resources. And contrary to popular belief, less rigorous analysis does not actually lead to faster decision times. However, not having the right staff or sufficient resources to conduct NEPA reviews leads to slower decision times. This means the past administration's efforts to starve federal agencies of staff and resources did not make reviews move faster. It actually made the delays worse, not better. My question, do these findings surprise you? And what are you and others in the administration doing to ensure that the federal government has the resources and staff to conduct environmental reviews in a timely manner?
So thank you, Senator, for that question. No, I guess it doesn't surprise me, having been a career staff person in the federal government for 14 years before I took on my first political position. I think what we know is that agencies are going to work to whatever you establish for them as the goal, and what gets cut is the quality of what gets done. And that is why I think we are trying in the action plan, one of the key pillars of that is to try to make sure that the agencies are assessing what their needs are and deploying the staff in places that are necessary, or at least working as a federal team to try to help each other, if you will, like to work in a way that we help each other so that the resources that are necessary in order to conduct the whatever is necessary for the permitting is available. And that is part of having the leadership in regular interaction around our permitting progress.
All right, second question. Given that this involves state and local governments, given that state and local agencies implement so many federal programs, what guidance, technical assistance, and support do you anticipate providing to our partners at the state and local level with permitting action plan? And in your answers, if you can clarify something for me, I'd be grateful. In the action plan and recent rulemaking, did CEQ roll back any of the timelines for decision-making? Do you roll back any of the timelines for decision-making? And also, are the changes intended to delay the investments we're making in the bipartisan infrastructure law? I don't think that's the case, but I'd like to hear from you directly on this issue, please.
Yeah, so first of all, on the action that we just took recently, it was 3 very targeted actions that did not affect the timelines or the one federal decision process or any of the kind of, in some ways, efforts that were specifically efficiency focused. That was not covered in our most recent rule. I think on the question about the resources and what we need to do there, the action plan itself is designed to help us or make the connections with the state and local entities who are very active in actually implementing the rules. It does not say what specifically we're going to do, but we identify that as an area in which we have to get together with preferably like a national level bodies that are coming from cities, like the League of City Voters. That's not the right name. That work kind of at a that work at a level where they're representative of both states. ECOS is an example of a body that we would envision kind of creating a relationship with that to help figure out how we can best work together with states, because we can improve our part, but our part is only one part. We can get the funding necessary to do our part, but then ultimately for a lot of the projects, it's really important that the state and local entities be able to also do their part.
All right. We've just been joined by Senator Wicker, and I'm willing to, and prepared to yield to him if he and Senator Sullivan are okay with that. Let me ask another unanimous consent request of my colleagues. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a congressional research report entitled "The Role of the Environmental Review Process in Federally Funded Highway Projects, Background and Issues for Congress." That's a mouthful. Which concludes that environmental reviews mandated by NEPA do not result in infrastructure projects delays when early stakeholder engagement is part of the project planning process. And I think I should yield to Senator Wicker. Yeah, Senator Wicker.
Mr. Chairman, I would defer to Senator Sullivan.
But I'd never do that.
He has not yet voted, and I have. It would be unfair
Yeah, I'm
for me.
getting screamed at.
Go,
But
Senator
this is
Sullivan, go ahead.
this is too important for me, so hopefully.
Second bite out of the apple, go right
Hopefully,
ahead.
they'll keep the vote open for me. So, Madam Chair, I'm obviously, I'm expressing frustration on, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but, this administration, the Biden administration, has issued 22 executive orders or executive actions solely targeting Alaska. 22. Guarantee you they're not doing it to Delaware. And my constituents are up in arms because it's targeting their livelihood. It's targeting their access to federal lands. Deb Haaland, Secretary Haaland, was in Alaska 3 weeks ago. She meets with the Nupiat people of the North Slope, who every single one of them said, no more regulations to lock up our lands. She smiled, nodded. She got back in 72 hours after her return. She issued a giant executive order, taken, as I mentioned, half of the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska off the table, and had the audacity to put in their rule that they were doing it because the Inupiat people wanted their subsistence right protected. She had just met with them, and that's not at all what they said. It was an insult. So I'm very frustrated, and I'm frustrated on behalf of my constituents. Senator Kelly's question, just, I'm sure you know, the average EIS takes almost 4 years. That's average. 1/4 of all EIS takes 6.5 years. Do you think those timelines are good for our country?
Senator, as I was saying, I mean, one of the reasons that we have released the permitting action plan is that we are trying to get the processing efficiencies in place in a way that will allow us to
There's a lot of people, a lot of smart people who think your NEPA rule will do the exact opposite and will give radical environmental groups the opportunity to sue away and delay more. I had a gold mine in my state. It's called the Kensington Gold Mine. It took 20 years to permit. 20 years. You think that's good for the country?
I know that there are extreme examples out there that we are trying to make sure that we address.
Let me ask, just with regard to the rule, as you know, under federal law, you do not only have to publish that in the Federal Register, the rule must be then submitted to the House and Senate before taking action. When does CEQ intend to do that? That's a federal law requirement.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, that's important. Let me ask just one final question. The president made this big deal about the lack of critical minerals, which really hurts our defense industrial base, our renewable sector, renewable technology, and that the administration is going to do all this great stuff to make sure we get critical minerals from America, not China. I had a recent amendment in terms of instructions for our conferees on the USICA conference that passed unanimously. Every U.S. senator said, hey, we should get our critical minerals and technology from America, our allies, and not China and not Russia. So, pretty broad bipartisan support for that. And yet, this administration reversed the Ambler mining district road decision in Alaska. Huge stock of critical minerals for our country in the Ambler mining district. You guys reversed it about 8 months ago. And then the big nickel, I believe it's nickel prospect in Minnesota was also recently reversed. These, again, were super big goals of the radical left environmental groups. And the president's saying, we're going to do this, and yet the actions you take, the clear actions, are harming America's ability to actually mine and process critical minerals. That's two examples, Minnesota and Alaska. So what is CEQ's role to oversee the administration's implementation of addressing the shortage of critical minerals that we need desperately in our country across the board, including for EV technology and batteries and military issues as well?
Yeah, so thank you, Senator, for the question. I mean, again, this is an area where the president has put some attention on the importance of putting ourselves as a country in a better position on critical minerals. And he has also recommended that we pursue mining reform based on principles that will essentially bring our modern ethos around environmental protection into the way that we proceed on mining. And so CEQ is actively engaged with other members of the White House on those efforts and initiatives.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Senator Rucker, thanks for joining us today. And before you go forward with your questions, let me just make another unanimous consent request, and that is I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record materials that show that U.S. oil production continues to recover despite claims that the Biden administration's actions have slowed drilling. All right. And without objection, that's so ordered. And with that, Senator Rucker, you're good to join us. The stage and the floor are yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to that document, to seeing that document that you just entered by unanimous consent. Madam Chair, thank you so much for visiting our state of Mississippi, and thank you for meeting with me earlier today about a grave problem, man-made flooding problem that we have in the South Delta concerning the Yazoo pump project. I very much appreciate that. You visited our state in February. In a nutshell, can you share with the committee what you learned?
Yes, well, it was a several-day trip in Mississippi with Secretary Holland, who basically was looking at some historic sites in the area as part of a direction from Congress. And so it was my opportunity to visit the Medgar Evers site, to visit the area that was involved in the killing of Emmett Till. And then we saw another site that was related to those two projects. And then I left her and I joined the Corps of Engineers, and we went and we visited the Yazoo pump area and the Corps.
Let me just interject that all of those sites are very important to me also, and so I'm glad you did. But specifically, you were about to get to the...
To Yazoo, yeah. So, and the purpose of that meeting was because obviously there is action that was taken by the Environmental Protection Agency that reinstated basically the 404C veto that had been used over that area. And so we are at a place where the question is now what? What do we do about what has to happen in these in this area in order to address the regular flooding that is occurring for communities, and to make sure that we're doing it in a way that that balances with the eco concerns that have been raised previously. And so that was the point of my seeing the area and having a chance to hear from the Corps experts on what they thought that the issues and opportunities were.
Good. Well, I realize I asked you a very general question, but you saw the area where the recurrent flooding takes place. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it is indeed a man-made problem caused by a project built by the federal government. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Well, thank you so much about that, and also thank you for meeting with me earlier, as I have already said. I think we agreed that a schedule has been pretty much finalized concerning getting all of the relevant agencies together and moving by the middle of July. I do appreciate that, and I appreciate your assurance that you'll get a copy of that schedule to me. And you are planning to do that, are you not?
That's correct.
Yes, ma'am. And then I think there's a two-pager where you and other agencies that are involved in this have sort of boiled down the relevant issues with regard to this proposal, and you're going to get that to me also. I'm
going to talk to the agencies about that. We're going to have some discussion about that.
Okay, all right. Well, I certainly hope you would do that, and so I might ask you also to get back to us on the record about that, but I hope you will. The 6 counties most affected by the flooding near the proposed Yazoo pumps are Sharkey County, where 30.3% of the residents are in poverty. Issaquah County, 43.3% of the residents there are in poverty. Humphreys County, 33.3% of the residents in that county are in poverty. Yazoo County, 31% of the residents are in poverty. Warren County, 19.2% of the residents are in poverty. The best one of the group, but still way too much. And Washington County, 27.7% of the residents are in poverty. The president has made environmental justice central to his environmental and climate agenda, and I understand you've been asked about that earlier, but would you agree that the statistics that I have read to you argue strongly for looking at this proposed project in terms of environmental justice?
Well, I will say, Senator, that is actually one of the things that's high on my list of follow-up on this project, because I have not yet had a chance to talk to the communities or even community leaders about either the project or just their own situation. And so that is something that is definitely on my list of things to do on this project.
Okay, and I think we agreed in our meeting earlier, which again I appreciate so much, that maybe some weekend soon, a long weekend, a break, or during the August break, at least by then, you might facilitate a team coming down and looking, talking to stakeholders and the low-income populations who are very much in support of this project, the minority populations who are in support of this project. So I appreciate you working with us. I think we're on the road to a schedule that gets us to a point in mid-July of actually decision-making, and I certainly look forward to learning as much as I can about the list of the issues that they boil down to. So thank you very much for working with us on behalf of the residents of the South Delta. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You bet. Thanks so much for joining us and for your persistent focus on this issue. As our colleague knows, one of the things that he talked about, the level of poverty in some of those counties, which is almost unbelievable. And one of the things I've found in my own work as governor and as a chairman of the National Governors Association, I've always hugely focused on job creation, job preservation. You want to help somebody, the best way you can help is make sure they have a job and they can lift themselves out of poverty. The 8 years I was governor of Delaware, more jobs were created in those 8 years in Delaware than any 8 years in the history of the state. I didn't create one of them. We helped create a nurturing environment for job creation, job preservation. And one of those factors, like workforce is important, tax is important, the reasonable regulation is important. Also as important is the quality of the environment. Is the water drinkable? Is the air something you can breathe? How about landfills and pollution, that sort of thing? All that's important as well, so it all works together. I don't know of any businesses that want to live in or operate in a place, start a business where there's water's undrinkable and the air is something you can't breathe. That's not a good thing. Having said that, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes if you wish. I'm going to ask one unanimous consent request, and I'm going to give you a minute or two or three to just come back and wrap up anything you felt like you'd like to reemphasize, maybe something you didn't have a chance to respond to. But while you think about that for a moment, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a report from the Federal Highway Administration, which found that between 90 to 99% of all road and bridge projects are completed as categorical exclusions and therefore are not subject to lengthy review under NEPA. That's worth repeating. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a report from the Federal Highway Administration that found that between 90 to 99% of all road and bridge projects are completed as categorical exclusions and therefore are not subject to lengthy review under NEPA. That surprises me. It probably surprised you and others on this committee. All right, that being said, I have something I'm going to say, I call it boilerplate right at the end, but I just want to give you the opportunity, maybe something you didn't say, didn't have a chance to say, question wasn't asked you wish had been. The time is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you, Senator Carper. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and just to share some of the work that CEQ is doing. I hope that my pride in the work that we are doing and of my staff and all that we're doing for the American people has come through in the discussion. I think we've accomplished a lot in this first year. We have much more to do, obviously, because the president has a very ambitious agenda, and I think we are working hard to achieve that sort of balance that really comes through in every single issue. I think I've probably used the word balance many times today, but what's important is trying to meet the multiple goals that the president has set out. We want to have well thought out, analyzed decisions that will endure, that will not be problems that are affected by floodplains that we failed to analyze. We want to make sure that the choices that we make reflect I think the public's expectation and investment in the federal government, that we are using our funds in an effective and a thoughtful way. And so I think NEPA continues to be it's a hard issue for people because people want their projects fast, but they also want them to last. And so I think what we're trying to achieve through the NEPA rules is that. I think the focus on environmental justice could not be more important. It is central that we reset the way in which we look at our approach to communities, our willingness to bring them into the process early, our willingness to make sure that they are part of our decision making. That doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, but I think we ought to be working in a way that we're trying to minimize the impacts that people are feeling, even if we don't agree on an actual technology or an approach. But we should be trying to set things up so that people are not suffering because of choices that we're making. And so I think that continues to be really important in the work that we're doing. We didn't get into a number of areas that CEQ is working. We didn't talk much about sustainability today or a lot of the work that's going on in the conservation area, but I can just assure you that we are pursuing all of our issues with that same focus. Like, what is going to benefit the American people under the agenda that this president has set? How do we do it so that all Americans get the benefit of it? And how do we do it so that we are being good servants and ensuring that the work is done in an effective way? So I will just end there. Thank you so much for the time.
No, you bet. Thank you for those comments. Those are worth waiting for. This is a wonderful committee, and I feel privileged to help lead it with the great leadership of Senator Shelley Capito. And the members of the committee don't agree on everything, but we work hard to try to find consensus and principled compromises where possible. It's important. I use the term phrases often. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that thought comes to mind as we discuss some of these difficult issues. But thank you for not only for coming today and for joining us and sharing an update of what y'all are up to at CEQ and the important work that you and your team are doing. Not without its challenges, but I think that you've demonstrated today and in the last months that you're up to the challenge. Thank you again for on Earth Day joining us in Delaware, for your attention to the concerns raised by Senator Wicker. And I think I heard in his comments an invitation maybe to head down to Mississippi sometime later this year. If you could do that, I know he'd appreciate that, and I would too. Before we adjourn, a little bit of housekeeping, and senators will be allowed to submit written questions for the record through the close of business on Wednesday, May 25th. We'll compile those questions. We'll send them to you and your staff. We ask that you reply to us by June 8th of this year. And unless there's something else that I'm missing, either side of the aisle. With that, I take this gavel and declare this hearing is adjourned. Thank you so much.